Welcome back to A Slice of News, where I cut you off a slice of news. First Lady Melania Trump recently made a public statement distancing herself from Jeffrey Epstein and claiming that she had no real connection with him or Ghislaine Maxwell. A claim which is incredibly hard to believe when you take into account all the numerous photographs with her and them and Donald. But on top of just being an obvious lie, the real question is, why did she feel the need to make a public statement of this sort in the first place? Theories abound, but the one thing many of them agree on is that she clearly seems to be trying to get ahead of something. Something's about to break, something's about to go public, and she wants to get ahead of it so that when it does, she can survive the blowback that inevitably comes. Her husband may have started a conflict in Iran to distract from the Epstein situation, but it seems like the Epstein situation is back in the forefront of the news once again. One likely possibility is she was trying to distance herself from Epstein because a lawyer representing several of Epstein's victims has recently called for President Trump to be deposed about numerous Epstein-related things, including the claims by one of her clients that Jeffrey Epstein introduced her to Donald Trump when she was 13 years old back in 1984. This same victim is the one who said that Donald Trump hit her in the head after she bit him, when he attempted to force her to perform indecent acts upon him. I'm sure if they ever manage to get the president in front of Congress, there will be a lot more that will come out and be asked about. But that alone sounds like something that she would definitely want to try to preemptively get away from, so that when things do start to go bad for him, she's not in the direct crossfire. The problem with deposing Donald Trump is that there's no reason to believe that once they get him talking that he will say anything truthful, and he will simply lie. And why wouldn't he? He doesn't care that he's under oath. Lying has always worked for him. He has reached high office not once but twice, purely on the backs of his numerous lies and falsehoods. If he were an honest or decent man, he would be concerned about perjuring himself before Congress, and he would be compelled to tell the real truth when confronted for it. But Donald Trump is none of those things, and would not think twice before lying to Congress. I say there's a pretty solid chance he believes that he's protected under presidential immunity and can't be prosecuted for his numerous crimes that he committed with his good friend Jeffrey Epstein. But unfortunately for him, and fortunately for both the victims and the American people in general, that is obviously completely untrue. That immunity that the Supreme Court granted him was for presidential acts only. Crimes like these, which were performed when he was not the president, would not be protected. A fact seemingly so incredibly obvious that is clearly lost on someone like him, who believes himself to be impervious, partially because up till now he seems to have been proven right. But while it's true that he's managed to dodge and escape just about everything Epstein related up to this point, the reality is that there's no way he can escape it forever. Even if I have no doubt he's going to try to pull the "you can't depose the sitting president" card, even though you absolutely can. Just ask Bill Clinton. Talk about Epstein and Melania's connections to it may have been reignited by a recent social media post by someone claiming to be Amanda Ungaro, the ex-partner of the modeling agent that actually introduced Melania to Donald Trump and also helped her move to the United States. In that post, Ungaro says, "Hello, Melania. I was around you for 20 years. I stayed close to your family, your mother, and your father, not because of you, but because of them. So shut your mouth when speaking about me, because I will expose everything I know." Now, while there's been no official corroboration that this account is genuinely from who it claims to be, since it's social media and anybody can say they're anyone, assuming the account is genuine and those claims do have weight, I have to imagine that post alone, that threat of exposure, must really have rattled the First Lady, since if this is who it claims to be, she knows a lot and has a lot she could expose. So it's very possible that Melania made her press conference denying any connections to Jeffrey Epstein, since once whatever Amanda Ungaro knows gets brought out publicly, Melania wants to be as far away from it as possible, and her calls for Congress to hold public hearings for the victims of Epstein is likely an attempt to not only paint herself as a noble individual who wants the victims to be heard, but also as a way to shift the narrative away from Donald Trump, away from her, While I could definitely believe Melania was not aware of some of the worst things that Epstein and her husband Donald were up to, the idea that she barely knew him, had no idea what he was doing, and was completely out of the loop, she barely even knew the guy, really doesn't seem plausible. She may not know everything, but she has to know something. Her husband Donald's far too deeply entrenched in this for her to be completely oblivious and completely knowing absolutely nothing. But here she is doing her best Colonel Klink impression, saying, "I know nothing." The full breadth of what Melania does or doesn't know has yet to be determined, but I have no doubt that she knows a lot more than she's claiming to. But lying and withholding information for your own self-preservation is something that she must have learned from her orange husband, because that's something he does on a daily basis. One thing is definitely for sure, though. Neither Trump is going to be able to avoid being held accountable for these things indefinitely. And the truth will come out, and those that were involved, regardless to what degree, will be punished for it. That is the truth the entire Trump family has been running from this entire time, but ultimately cannot escape. While the full extent of the Epstein files have not yet been released, and possibly never will be, once the majority of them are, culpability will be most definitely established. Though to what extent is a genuinely good question, since I have no doubt that a large portion of these files no longer exist to be released in the first place. They were most definitely destroyed as soon as possible. So frustratingly, the most damning stuff may never come to light now. It is still possible that once the victims do get their time to testify and be heard by Congress, that a lot of the information in those files will be made public, but without those documentations to corroborate them, there's less chance that they will actually be believed. Victims' testimony can only do so much. It's why criminal cases don't rely heavily on it and actually usually hinge on actual evidence, which of course is why the full release of the Epstein files has been something that's been pushed for over and over and over and has not stopped. Because actual literal evidence is a lot harder to refute than simply the oral testimony of Epstein's victims. I do find it almost funny how it seems like this reignition of the Epstein discussion seems to come at a time where the conflict in Iran is going the worst for the administration. So it's almost a distraction from Iran, which itself was a distraction from Epstein in the first place. So it's a distraction from a distraction that circles back to the original thing. I know Acting Attorney General Todd Blanchett is trying to distance the entire Department of Justice from having to deal with Epstein file stuff. Basically saying, as far as he is concerned, the Department of Justice is done with Epstein files. But as he will find, you can't simply declare that you're done with Epstein like you're Michael Scott on The Office declaring bankruptcy. Just like Michael Scott couldn't declare he was bankrupt because he declared it, Todd Blanchett can't declare that they're done with Epstein because he declares it. The more comes out and is set to come out, the more obvious it is that this is something that is not going away. Blanchett's predecessor, Pam Bondi, was fired from her position as Attorney General less than a week and a half before she was set to be deposed in front of Congress about her handling of the Epstein files. And many are saying even if she is no longer in that position, she still must be compelled to testify. The administration, of course, argues that since she's no longer the Attorney General, she can't be compelled to testify about the stuff that she did as Attorney General, which, of course, was the whole idea behind firing her from her position when she was. With, of course, the reasoning being you can't depose the Attorney General, Pam Bondi, about her handling of Epstein files if she's no longer Attorney General. But I would argue that since the things she did predate her removal from the position, her not being in it doesn't preclude her from testifying about what she did when she was. In fact, I'd almost argue that she's more compelled to do so now than she was while she was serving as Attorney General, since now what does she have left to lose? They can't double fire her. And the Oversight Committee deserves to know what she knows in full, and so do the American people. So I guess I have to circle back to a singular point. It's that the Epstein files are back at the forefront, where they should be, and more truths feel like they're forthcoming. And who knows, the way things are going, maybe all of Epstein's victims will get their chance to be heard, will get their chance to say what they know and what they experienced. And at long last, accountability Transparency and justice will be done, and we will all be better for it. The victims, the American people, everyone. Well, maybe not those involved, but that goes without saying. But I'm definitely here for it, and when I hear about it, you'll hear about it. Alright guys, that'll be it for this episode of A Slice of News. I've been your host, Mr. Slice, and until next time when I cut you off another slice of news. And don't forget to rate and review the show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you find it.